And welcome to episode 59 of the Brood Sages, Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader. With me, as always, are Subaiku and Thomas. Subaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
And Thomas, how are you doing?
Pretty all right.
We are the Brood Sages, easily the second best Stormbound related podcast in production. And as a reminder, you can always follow us at Brood Sages on Twitter. Or for all of you who are interrupting your game of Pokemon to listen to this, our email address is thebroodsages@gmail.com. Well, it's that time of the month, folks. Patch notes have been released. Therefore, the Brood Sages are coming together to give you yet another set of hot takes, which may or may not be accurate or inaccurate, or both, on the upcoming changes to our beloved game. I don't think there's any need to touch on too much stuff, but I thought it would be at least relevant to some of our listeners, guys, before we jumped into all of that, to talk about some of the new cards that have just been released over the last couple of weeks. Thomas, are you liking any of the new cards?
Well, I've done a little bit of testing with Stream, and it's way too random for my liking.
Oh, it's a meme card extraordinaire, right? Like you don't play it to dominate games. You play it for the oh look, I made a North Sea dog of moment.
Or like the game that Subaiku played against me, where he played the 1 mana Erotic Neglects and then 3 mana Stream of Consciousness and got a perfect 4 mana Cabin Girls.
So at
Oh,
least I broke even on that one.
That's totally whelming.
Didn't help me win that game.
I would imagine it didn't. So, like, what are you thinking of the new cards?
I've been actually pretty extensively testing both Stream of Consciousness and Final Sacrifice. I think both of them are actually pretty adequately powered. If you get the combo, it's pretty fun with Final Sacrifice, making some big diehards. It's pretty neat, but it takes a lot of mana to do it. You don't consistently advance your front. The spawns are random on the diehards, so you maybe just put a big pile of stats near your baseline and it doesn't do anything. And like you guys said with Stream of Consciousness, it's totally random. You play it in the mid game and it either wins or loses you the game on the spot. I got a Klaxi, it was amazing.
Oh my
I
gosh.
got Spare Dragonling, it was terrible. Like, you don't know which way it's gonna go, but you got something like 150 or 160 options. So
What could go wrong?
It'll be fun at least.
Yeah, I have been playing around with Final Sacrifice quite a bit. I leveled it up, and mostly so just to level 4. I didn't need to level it to 5 because it turns out diehards at level 5 are targetable with a level 4 Final Sacrifice, and that's the only two decks I was considering were diehards with it or green prototypes as like a meme, just trying to buff my opponent's stuff by 10. But so I have to say, I agree with you that it's not like reliable that you move your front, but if you pair those cards with Dark Harvest, I found that like it's really hard for your opponent to fully remove 24 health from the board. So you're going to have stuff sticking around that you can reliably take advantage of Dark Harvest with. So I'm liking that card. I like that deck. It's maybe not tier 1, but the card combo is super fun. My biggest issue is I dumped all my fusion stones into it, and for the most part, I would tip my hat to Sheepyard and say they've done a really good job of introducing a lot of new cards that you didn't have to have leveled all the way up in order to utilize their power. But this Stream of Consciousness thing, let me tell you how bad it is playing it and getting, here's my level 5 erratic. I get a level 1 back.
What? Yeah, that one you definitely need to have on a level commensurate with your other cards.
That's just
at least on the bright side, it's a common.
Well, yeah, but I just used up all my fusion stones on diehards.
You want to know what I just realized?
Mm-hmm.
We have not yet added these cards to draft mode. Stream is probably going to be a T0 draft card.
T0, that's a bold claim.
Yeah, but you can sacrifice your level 1 card and get a level 5 card out of it.
But hold on, wait. It needs to be an ancient.
Exactly. You do need to
Oh,
get that
crap.
synergy, though. You have to sacrifice an ancient, and there are not that many in the game.
No, there's not.
Now, on the other hand, the commons tend to come later in the draft.
Right.
So if you have already selected an ancient, at least you'll be able to take advantage of it if you see it.
I guess, but
But
the
I
thing you
don't,
have
it's definitely not worth selecting an ancient just on the hopes that you get it, though, right?
no, but if it's Lost
I'm trying this
Psyches,
now.
if it's Lost Psyches, you want Lost Psyches anyway, and you want it level 5 to begin with, because Lost
Hmm.
Psyches, good. All right, well, with that then, guys, why don't we move into our main topic? We have patch notes for July. We will include these patch notes, of course, in our show notes, if I remember, and they are already available. Let's start with some of the balance changes for this upcoming month. Thomas, why don't you get us started with the Chili Stone Dames?
So, one strength buff across the board. I think this is perfectly acceptable. In fact, I like it a lot now for draft mode even more.
Hmm. Okay.
Going from 4 strength to 5 strength for 5 mana is a big deal. That's the reason why we have something like Soul Crushers as a T0 card, because 5 mana for 1 mover with 5 strength is perfectly acceptable, and this has a crazy good ability in that mode. So I like it a lot for draft. It doesn't change anything for ranked.
Sabaiku, do you think this is a draft buff?
Definitely a draft buff. In ranked mode, I think it makes the lower levels much better,
Okay.
but I don't think it's necessarily still particularly usable. It's just the positional requirements of making the trade and only destroying things in a column. It's not great. It's tough to pull off. There is, I will say, a lot of Swarm, a lot of Zuri
Yeah.
in the Heroes League right now, so
Shh, we
maybe
don't
this
talk about
helps.
that.
We don't talk about Zuri.
But I mean, oftentimes that Zuri's going onto my baseline anyway, and if I'm playing Chilled Stone games, it just doesn't counter it.
It's true, yeah.
That's a really good point. All right. Well, let's move on from Chilled Stone Dames, which is becoming quite the draft card. And let's discuss Bounded Demons. Sabaiku, Bounded Demons is getting a boof.
Yeah, Bounded Demons also get a strength buff of +1 across the levels. So instead of going from 3 to 6, it goes from 4 to 7 on the main body. The spawns are staying the same. Now, this I do actually think is a little impactful. So, full disclosure, I actually played some Bounded Demons because I got Stream of Consciousness and I needed
Oh
these little
God.
token ancients.
Oh
And
no.
it did not go great.
Okay,
But
good.
oftentimes it did not go great because it died to Hunter's Vengeance, it died to Sparkly Kitties, it died to Destructobots. Like, it doesn't do that anymore. It's still awkward to use because it doesn't move, and that makes it very difficult unless you actually have a lot of room on the board to operate. But yeah, the fact that it just doesn't die to 2 mana cards anymore is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, Thomas, we used to have this saying that like 5 health was the break point for like high level play. A 5 health strength was kind of, if it could survive 5 health, it was in good shape.
Hmm.
I kind of feel like Sabaiku's right here. 6 health has become the new break point.
It absolutely has. That's most likely due to Sparkly Kitty's, not gonna lie.
Fair enough. Well, Hunter's
Um,
Vengeance, I still see Hunter's Vengeance.
that's true, yeah, occasionally, yep. The other thing that I like about this, going back over to draft mode again, going up to 4 strength, Cabin Girls was just a little bit too underwhelming. So if you staple a nice little ability to Cabin Girls, makes the Cabin Girls quite a bit better.
Oh yeah, and if you are going second, your opponent has to either play a non-moving turn 1 or pass. Bounded Demons was like a nutty opening beforehand. It's just going to be better now.
Yeah, in the early draft for sure.
I've definitely had drafts where I played Bounded Demons and it's triggered like 3 or 4 times as it marches down the board, and I just continue to protect it. Like it's very good in draft mode a lot of the time already, and this just makes it better. On ladder, I'm still not sure. Movement is kind of king in draft and ladder, but the fact that it survives a little bit more, I'm definitely going to experiment with it
All
in
right,
Stream of Consciousness.
I think my bounded demons are level 4 and only a couple of copies away, so I might try it out as well. Thomas, good old Ulf, which I feel like has been buffed and nerfed and nerfed and buffed, or am I misremembering which of the winter legendaries gets all the movement changes and stuff?
Honestly, I don't remember because it's never been good enough to see competitive play, so I never touched it.
Poor
So
Ulf.
it
Wow,
I
is.
love
shots
Ulf.
fired.
Man.
Well, then maybe that's the reason why it's getting a buff.
Fair
It's
enough. Fair enough.
getting one strength across the board, and not gonna lie, I don't see this as doing anything for the card in ranked. I literally just put it into a deck about a week ago, and I was just constantly trying to jam it and play it and play it and play it. And every single time I had it in hand and I could play it, I was like, I would play it this turn if I had Siren of the Seas, but if I just
Mm,
play Ulf, I'm gonna lose. And so after just losing over and over, I switched out Ulf for Siren and I quit losing. The issue is that most of these other decks are putting like 30, 40 power worth of strength onto the board by these really late turns in the game, and a 18 strength and then now 19 strength or value Ulf is just not going to be enough.
yeah, the healing just isn't enough healing to really impact the game, to your point, if your opponent has just played like a Bragda,
Yeah, a
which doesn't
Bragda
happen
or a
anymore, but
Bucks,
or
and they
Bucks.
suddenly just put 20 strength on your baseline. Just from the purely from the value of the Bucks, not to mention the other 3 or 4 mana worth of cards that they put onto your baseline on that same turn.
Right, exactly.
So
All right, well, it's stronger, Sabaiku.
It is stronger, but I have to agree with Thomas. If you're in the position where you can spend 9 mana on Ulf and not lose the game, you're winning that game no matter what you spend 9 mana on most of the time. Like it's really rare that you're up against like exactly a chip deck where you need this much healing in order to survive. Like that's about the only time where Ulf is better and worth it.
Yeah, there definitely was a time where I was playing like chestnuts all the time, and Ulf decks were my bane. But it was just that deck that cared whether or not you were running Ulf.
And a lot of the time you can still fight through the healing anyway. If your deck is heavy enough that you can clear and play Ulf and be fine, like then congratulations, you won that game before you even put Ulf on the board.
hmm yeah,
So,
exactly.
so all the balance changes so far have been playing with that first lever that we talk a lot about, strength, right? Upping strength, lowering strength. We also have mana changes. We have movement changes. This next one is a very different kind of buff, and I really like it. I don't know if this is now a good card or not, but I really like the ability now, and I like the fact that Shipyard is experimenting with other kinds of modifications to the cards. Sabaiku, what is going on with Excited Mousers?
Excited Mouser's ability will now trigger board wide instead of just surrounding, and that actually is significant, and it might actually make the card playable. It's a big, chunky 5 mana unit. It still doesn't have movement, which you know
Problematic.
is problematic. We like movement in general, but the fact that you can play it to stall out something on your baseline while still attacking your opponent's baseline, or at least protecting a unit that's attacking your opponent's baseline, like that's not nothing. Before, if you wanted to use it defensively to stall, you also had to play it back at your own baseline next to the units that were attacking you, and it was really frustrating because it made it much easier for your opponent to clear your pressure and continue attacking. Because when that 12 strength excited mousers is all the way back across the board, they got plenty of time to worry about it. You can play it up near their baseline, threaten something like a Forgotten Souls next turn. That's important.
5 mana for 12 strength is pretty solid already, and this ability buff is huge. When we've talked before about the strength, the movement, and the mana, the reason why we avoided the entire conversation about the abilities being changed is because, I mean, honestly, they don't happen that often. and some abilities being changed are way more impactful than other abilities being changed. So it really has to be on a case by case scenario. When Siege Breakers had its buff going to surrounding, or Dark Harvest going to surrounding, massive changes. And I do think that this is as strong as a buff as, no, I was going to say as one movement, but no, it's movement to one on this thing would be essentially just a fluffy. So we know how strong that is.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, but I'm glad you brought up Fluffy, because that was the question I was going to ask you, Thomas. And then I'll ask Sabaiku afterwards what he thinks. Since Fluffy has lost its edge as the premier 5-drop in the game, there's been this sort of, is it Ubis, is it Loris, is it whatever? Does this at least put Excited Mousers in that conversation as a, oh, well, this is one of the fleet of cards to consider as your 5-drop? Or is it still, you think, a tier below those others?
It's a half a tier below them. It would be a tier below them if we still had 2-mana Rain of Frogs,
Oh
because honestly,
gosh.
this is only going to confuse 2 or 3 frogs. But because Rain is basically non-existent, this is going to confuse solid cards that you'd want to confuse in the first place. So it essentially gets everything that you need to. But it's because it doesn't have movement and it doesn't have Ubis's crazy strong ping damage or Zuri's flyover. It's a half tier below them.
Yep, I'll agree with that. Which, having a rare be half a tier below the legends is pretty good. I'd take that.
Hmm.
I think it's as good as, say, like a Harvester of Souls, that kind of 5-mana card. Definitely in
Okay.
that running. And we've talked in the past about how important it is for a rush deck to be able to buy that one extra turn. Having something that tanks your front line while also providing stall for your opponent's attacking units. You can make use of that.
They're blessed with Brawn on their unit that's on your baseline. I like
Oh dear.
that.
Right? I mean,
Now it's
chances are good they only have that one unit, so you're going to be able to confuse it.
Yeah. Well, especially because before Fluffy couldn't even do that anyway because
right.
it had too much strength. This one is a guaranteed. That thing is confused. Oh, I'm liking this a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think, there are metas where Ubis is better. There's no Rain of Frogs right now. Ubis is really good, but then suddenly everybody's playing Zuri, and Ubis stops being as good because there's so many satyrs on the board. And also, you just need Loris. Loris becomes the better 5-drop to be playing for a while. I'm wondering if there aren't metas where Excited Mousers becomes actually in this situation right now, you're better playing Excited Mousers than you are playing Ubis, kind of a thing.
Um,
I don't know.
Close, but not quite. Right now, the decks are pretty mid-rangey. There's
Hmm.
some metas sometimes in the month where decks are extremely rushy and they're just trying to like base lock you, and that's where Excited would be better. The decks are a little bit more mid-rangey where they're not trying to base lock you. They're just trying to outvalue you and use large units into your baseline, and that's where Ubis is going to be generally better value wise.
All right, that's fair enough. I'm glad that this next one is for Subaiku, because I
Because
you
you want to
re-
hear me swearing about it.
no, I know you remember, like, during the Kennedy administration when we were trying to put a man on the moon, and you can regale us with some of these stories of what it was like to be alive back then. And I think during that time, Rockworkers actually had one movement. Like, what was it like back in those dark ages?
It was terrible. It was terrible. Just dwarves everywhere, throwing these forts up. And now we're back to those days. Rockworkers are getting movement again, up to one movement from 0. But in a surprising birth, the strength is now 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at least there's a little bit of a decrease in the strength of the body to offset this. But the strength of the fort looks like it's remaining the same. So
That's a 3-mana fort.
it's a 3-mana fort, which makes it a 2-mana 7 strength that moves 1.
which is a premium, beyond premium stats.
I would play that if it were a standalone card. That's pretty reasonable.
Doesn't even have Kitty's back. Well, I'm not even going to call the Kitty's downside a downside, because a lot of times it's really good to have.
It's basically, this is like playing Lost Psyches for 3 mana, and then also getting a 2 mana Fort of Ebon Rock.
So a one, except Lost Psyches doesn't guarantee you the movement. This has guaranteed movement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
the
just
Lost
better.
Psyches is on the fort.
Right. You have no control where the fort is going most of the time. It's definitely a problem if you play it at your own baseline. But
It
if
can
you
be.
can throw this down in the middle of the board, if you can throw it down near your opponent's baseline, it's just a ton of stats. 5 mana is a lot to pay for that, admittedly, but
But it's so
it's
good.
totally worthwhile. You know, you were talking about Blessed with Brawn decks earlier, Thomas. You could definitely fit this into Blessed with Brawn, just something to tank your front line, and then something else to tank your front line, right? Like, it's just Rockworkers to make sure that you get an anchor down on the opponent's side of the board, and then GP and Blessed with Brawn and say good luck.
I
Yep.
wonder if Siege Breakers needs to be an include if this starts to tick up in usage.
It will tick up in usage, and Siege Breakers does need to be in every single deck going forward. I'm serious about that. Rockworkers is way too good. It will be in every single winter deck that you play against, I promise.
Yeah, I remember those days, and it was rough. I've also thought for a while that it's a shame that Rockworkers is now totally unplayable.
Yeah, as it is right now with no movement and 8 strength, Rockworkers is just fair. And the problem is, you know, we talked about the competition just a moment ago for the 5 mana slot. Like, a lot of those cards aren't fair. Lourdes isn't fair. Ubis isn't fair. Zuri isn't fair. Like, they're really strong. Like, Rockworkers with no movement is kind of comparable to Zuri buffing 1 unit.
Or Fort of Ebon Rock with a non-moving 2-drop.
But Zuri has a lot of upside in that it can move your front in ways not too many other cards can, and Zuri can buff multiple units. Rockworkers never drops multiple forts on the board for you.
Wait. If I play Final Sacrifice on it,
There you go. Now you're thinking.
see, you just gotta think outside the box, man.
Yeah.
That's what it's
Now,
all about.
overall, I just see too many games ending where I play Rockworkers on, I guess it'd be A4, and it throws the structure into B4.
Mm-hmm.
Rockworkers goes onto my opponent's baseline, and on their 5 mana turn, it's literally impossible to clear my Rockworkers.
Right? Like, even Siege Breakers doesn't help you there because,
Exactly.
like,
Correct.
Siege Breakers can go in, destroy the fort. They're going to have 1 mana left. The green prototypes cannot do any damage to Rockworkers, so 7 damage goes into their baseline. They're at 13. Guess what has a perfect 13 damage for 6 mana?
and that fort doesn't count as a unit for Wolf Cloaks.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is gonna now find a home in any kind of winter deck, honestly. Like, it's also gonna be just a good defensive tool. It's gonna be a good mid-range tool that
Yep.
you're gonna be able to slot it in into any winter deck. Will it always be the best 5 mana card to have? No, but it's always gonna be useful.
Yeah, that's the
Exactly.
thing about it, is now with movement, it's just always useful. It's always useful, and it's just
Yep. Whereas in the past, because Winter never had any decent low mana moving cards, there's a lot of times where they were like on their 5 mana turn, and Rockworkers was like the only play, and it was too risky to let that fort spawn into one of the center tiles where you could get base locked a lot easier. With all the low mana cost cards that are in every single deck these days, winter decks are always going to have some front to mitigate that risk.
Right. Well, look, when Rockworkers had movement last time, we didn't have Rhymelings at 4 mana. It was 5 instead. We didn't have Icicle Burst and Javanna doing their magic. We didn't have 5 mana Blessed with Brawn. Wolf Cloaks didn't do as much damage. Like, the amount
We
of.
didn't have Saber or Sparkly.
you had
We
Saber.
we
You
did
do
have
have
Saber.
Saber.
We did not have Sparkly. Yep. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, the tools that Winter has for the early game now are vastly different. Now, other factions do have enhanced tools for the early game also, right? Like everybody's got sparkly kitties. So maybe there's some chance to answer, but man, I am nervous about this one in a way that I am not nervous about any of the other balance changes.
Sparkly Kitties
Agreed.
on her own can't, even if you play her in Thomas's scenario, even if you play her in B5, Sparkly Kitties only has a 50-50 chance of reducing, but not actually clearing. And I think that's my biggest problem with Rockworkers with movement is it's a Fort of Ebon Rock. That's 3 mana. It's a stronger 2 mana than any other 2 mana with or without movement as the body going along with the Fort of Ebon Rock for 5 mana. And I would like to see it be a reasonable 2 mana moving card if it's going to have movement. I would feel like that's a little bit more fair. You know what I mean? Like
so if it capped out at 6 strength, for example, it's on par with the best 2 mana cards in the game.
Yeah,
it's on par with Westwind Sailors. So it's like that 2 to 3 mana range for the moving body, and then on top of that, you get the fort.
Exactly. Like HV doesn't clear it. That's HV is not going to do damage at all to the fort, but it should at least clear the body.
Yeah, no, literally the only way to get the same value is to play Siege Breakers in your deck. And that's the reason why I think that every single deck that you sleeve up, you should just put Siege Breakers in now.
I don't know if it'll be that widespread, and that's the problem with putting Siege Breakers in every single deck, right? Those times when you do run into Rock Workers, it'll be useful most of the time.
Siege Breakers is a
It's always
perfectly
used.
fine.
It's just an 8-1.
Yeah, it's a perfectly fine card to play. The issue, like the reason why like you need to play this is because Winter already won last season's Heroes League, and sees or like Winter mid-range Winter Rush is, well, we haven't been really doing the meta report, but I would say that it's a good 25% of the meta is Winter mid-range Winter Rush, and with Rockworkers, I wouldn't be surprised to see it at around 33 to 40% of the meta.
See, the problem I had when I ran Rockworkers in my mid-range winter deck way back in the day was that inevitably there was just, I swear it's in the code and you can't prove me otherwise. The Hearth only buffs the spawn of a Rockworkers once it's on the board. The buff cannot go anywhere else aside from the Rockworkers structure.
Okay, you get a big fort that way.
Huge fort, biggest fort ever. All right. Well, we've talked about it. We've highlighted it. This is something that I think all agree is a going concern, and we will see how it works out. Rockworkers might be a smidge too strong still, which makes the original version of Rockworkers like head-scratchingly powerful.
But there's a reason why it was nerfed in the first place.
Nerfed out of existence for a while. Thank you. Let's move on from there. Midwinter's Chaos. Tomas, would you like to talk to us about Midwinter's Chaos?
One extra strength across the board for its ability of freezing, and I like this. I do honestly wish that it would be an additional 1 strength at level 5. It would be really cool to actually see it do or freeze things up to 10 strength or less. I think the whole costing 4 mana is a little bit too severe for the card's ability.
Huh. Okay. I look at this card, I look at this buff, and I think in the decks that wanted this much freeze, this will be a nice little bonus. I don't feel, Subaiku, like this changes the calculus about whether or not you play it in generic winter deck ABC.
No, it's still only in a very, very specialized deck, and now that deck is marginally more effective, and I don't know that it was necessarily all that effective in the first place. Maybe putting Rockworkers in that deck makes it a lot more effective than the buff to Midwinter Chaos does.
You heard it here, folks.
Huh, my Midwinter deck suddenly just got a lot better.
It's a ton better. It's insane.
Yeah, like it does what it does now. It does it barely a little bit more. Like, I don't know. I got to tell you, like, Freeze Winter is not something I've really experimented with very much. I can't imagine that it's particularly effective based on how little I run into it on ladder.
When I run into it, though, I oftentimes just throw my phone after the game, even if I win. Like 22 minutes of my life just went by. What is going on? All right. Well, moving on from there, we have one last one. Sabeka, would you like to tell us about Temple of Space?
Yes, I would. I would love to tell you about Temple of Space because
Well, then
Temple of
do it.
Space is a fantastic card. And now the strength on the temple is up instead of going from 3 to 7, from level 1 to 5. Now it's from 4 to 8. So it's right on par with the Fort of Ebonrock or upgrade point, but it still has its cool teleporting ability. And that's awesome. So now you're not paying a strength penalty for clogging up your hand with the temple. Um, and sometimes you get an awesome teleport out of it, and that's pretty cool.
It's a better card in draft now, is it not?
I gotta tell you, I draft this card all the time.
You do tell me every time you do it. It's all like I get nonstop text
I
for like
got
2 days until
I
the run
got
is over.
6 wins with Temple of Space today. In fact, before the buff, still a good draft
But
card.
you said 6 wins. How many losses?
0, 6-0,
Oh,
6-0.
jeez.
Yeah, with Temple of Space getting cycled every time. But there's a lot of other really good Ironclad cards. So mostly I draft Temple of Space to get those. But occasionally it does actually come in really useful when you move your units around, move their units around. It's a lot of fun to get like random base locks because games in draft often go pretty long. So
Yeah, they do.
yeah,
It's true.
like 12 mana. It's like, all right, let me just play a unit, put a temple behind it, and then move that temple up to their baseline. Boom! Now they're locked in, and I win.
See, I made this joke about maybe it was about a month ago, where I said that some cards' text needs to be changed for draft mode to better explain what the card's use is for draft. And I suggested at the time that Toad, the Elevated, should have its card text changed in draft mode only to say allows you to play Shadowfen cards. And I think a Temple of Space could equally be argued to do the same thing. I do agree, though, that in draft it is easier to find value with it because the games go longer, and so you get to the point where using it is a little more viable. Along with all of these balance changes, which we've just highlighted at length, apologies, and also you can go on to Stormbound Kitty and read the patch notes again. You'll see those in our show notes. We have a few new cards, two to be exact. And I'm so excited about this first one because I love Reckless Rush. I will go on the air right now and admit to being an unabashed Reckless Rush fanboy. I think he's the best. I love Reckless. I'm so glad to see him getting some recognition. Thomas, what is happening with Reckless?
He is finally getting his own card.
Yes.
And the amazing thing, and the card, Reckless Rushers,
Where'd
is
they come up with that name?
so original.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3 mana epic, undead, and it's a 3 movement card for 3 mana. Strength across the board is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Wait, it's Rapid Mousers?
for 1 less mana.
Oh my gosh, that's insane. That's busted. That's like Reckless Rush good.
I'm really excited for this card. And obviously, Heroes League in draft mode, it's probably the worst of the worst.
Right. Yeah, we did
Yeah.
not read the ability.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Before attacking, deal 1 damage to your own base. So you could definitely try to move through some toads and rack up the damage real quick.
So this is like anti-Vindicators.
Basically,
Yes. Yep.
half the
So
cost, half the damage. Right. Just
For the
to
wrong
yourself.
person.
So in ranked mode, it's a slightly better Limelings. I would way rather have the 1 extra movement over Limelings than the 1 damage to my base. So that's awesome there. But Limelings is terrible in draft because such a low value card for the mana cost, and this is obviously slightly worse because you're also taking a point of damage or up to 2 points of damage. Additionally, it being epic means that you are almost never going to have the opportunity to level it up. So you're going to be playing a 3 mana 1 or 2 mover, very similar to the way Restless Goats is in draft. So absolute bottom of the barrel tier 3 in draft,
You realize that
unfortunately.
now that you've said that, Reckless Rush is going to post a video of him going 6-0 with a deck built around Reckless Rushers just to prove you wrong.
Please try. I would love to see it.
I'm glad that they made this an epic because Reckless is epic. So that was a good choice. But I will say that I am still a little concerned, even though we just got handed a few commons. Sabaiku, it feels like we're like, ooh, there's a lot of fusion stones needed, or copies, or a lot of packs that require rubies to get some of these cards.
Hopefully, you can find it through your draft rewards. Get a few extra copies every week. That way, it is a little rough that we're starting to see more epics again. I was a little optimistic after last month, where all the new cards were rare and common. And that was a little bit nicer. Our second new card, at least, is a common, so that'll be a little bit easier to level up. I was hoping we were done with epics for a little while, but
Again, though, it
it's
is
a good
Reckless,
card. Like
right?
it's comparable to Restless Goats for sure. So
Yeah, it should be an epic.
that's an epic. So this should be also.
Mhm.
It's we haven't even really talked about, does this fit into any deck? It does. It does.
Lots of them.
It fits into a lot of aggressive swarm decks, which is
There are
most
a lot
swarm
of.
decks. So you'll be fine.
Well, if you're interested in getting this card, it will be available July 10th. So not at the beginning of the month, but halfway through. And we have a second new card, which thankfully you can't use with the first one, because if you dump all your fusion stones into it, then you won't have any for the second. So don't worry about it. Pick which one of these two you want to test out this month and save your fusion stones for that. Thomas, what is this new card?
You gave me Reckless Rusher, so we can give this one to
Oh wait,
Sabaiku.
oh did I do
Oh,
that?
good. Yeah, I'm happy to
Oh, I
talk
am
about this one.
so sorry about that. Sabaiku, why don't you tell me about this new card?
Awakening of the Will. Neutral common spell. 3 mana cost. Give strength to 1/1/2/2/2 random friendly units with no ability equal to their mana cost, and then give them additional strength up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of their mana cost. So a really complicated wording on this ability. But what it looks like is basically you play a vanilla card with no ability. If you have a couple of them on the board, you play this, and it'll randomly target 2 of them at the levels 3 to 5 at least, and give them strength up to their mana cost plus, say it's a level 5 card, up to their mana cost plus 5. So you play this on a Westwind Sailor, you get an extra 8 strength on it for 3 mana, so it's better than Potion of Growth right there.
It's not bad.
But on top of that, if you also have gifted recruits on the board, you get an extra 5 strength, an extra 7 strength on your gifted. So now you just got 15 strength for 3 mana because you played a couple of cards in your deck. Like, that's not bad.
The one thing I don't like about this card, though, is it says it targets vanilla cards with no skills, right?
Yeah, no on playing, no
with
before
no
moving, no before attacking, no on death.
It should target heroes. I am a vanilla person with no ability. Why don't I get any sort of benefit from playing this card directly? It should heal my base. I have 0 ability. There's total plain vanilla.
Right.
Nothing.
What I like about this is that this scales with mana cost. So number 1,
okay,
don't play it with Rain of Frogs. 0 mana tokens, terrible for this, right? Merge tokens aren't going to get any benefit out of this.
Well, don't they get the +5 or no?
Up to 5 of their mana cost.
Oh.
Yeah, so 0
actually,
mana cards.
so we actually did it totally wrong before when we talk about Westwind
So
and
Westwind,
Gifted, right?
Westwind will get 3 plus
so
another
6.
3.
Correct.
And Gifted gets 2 plus
plus
only
2.
another 2.
So 10 strength for 3 mana. Still 10 strength for 3 mana, better than Pog.
Yeah, but not as good as Fort Tonic.
Not as good as Fort Tonic, but you don't have to have a Fort or unstable build or whatever on the board. You don't even have to have these bordering each other. You don't like boosting elixir requires, right? No bordering or surrounding. You don't need to be near a structure. It's just have them on the board somewhere, make them big.
And oh boy, if you're playing heroic soldiers,
right? Now you get 5+5, an extra 10 for 3 mana on top of whatever else it buffs. If you have flameless lizards in your deck, right? You want something big and chunky to anchor your front line. It's got 14 strength at level 5. You could give it an extra 10.
Right, so that moves up to 24. So the problem that I have with Thomas's suggestion of heroic soldiers getting plus 10, the flaw in that is that I have to be playing heroic soldiers.
You caught that, huh?
Yeah. You do have to. So, all right, it's a tricky problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want your vanilla cards with no abilities to be significantly stronger than the cards with abilities, because then everyone would just say, well, why would I bother playing Harvester of Souls? I don't want the game to go that long anyway. I'm just going to play Heroic Soldiers because it's stronger.
I mean, that was the fluffy thing. Nobody cared about the confusion.
The confusion was a little bit of a bonus, but you were trying to put that fluffy on your opponent's baseline undamaged because it was impossible to clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't make your vanilla cards stronger than the cards with abilities, or else people just don't play the cards with abilities. So this is a nice way to incentivize you to play vanilla cards without actually buffing the vanilla cards. It's a little clunky, the deck building restriction is a little rough. You're going to find people kind of targeting the most important ones and playing those, or the ones that they were going to put in their deck anyway, like gifted recruits. They'll say, all right, well, maybe I was going to play Westwind anyway, and I'll throw this card in and try to get a little strength buff out of it at some point.
Yeah, but this is not enough of a strength buff to make it worth including this card for.
Yeah, I like the way that it incentivizes up to like 4, 5, 6 mana cards before it starts dropping off in efficacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My biggest question is this a problem being solved, or is this a solution in search of a problem?
This, in my opinion, is actually a problem. So
okay.
The reason I personally don't like this card, I'm gonna go off on my mountain and die on it. I don't like this card for two reasons.
Is that a phrase?
Maybe.
Okay.
If so, if not, I've just made it up.
It sounds good.
Like
go off on your
hill,
mountain and die on it.
Yes, exactly.
This hill's too small.
So I don't like it. Number one, for a draft, because this is going to be essentially worse than like a lot of the otherwise terrible cards like marked as prey. You're just not going to have anything else that this is going to buff, and it is just a straight card that does literally nothing that you have to cycle every single time. The other reason I don't like this is because this puts a wall to vanilla cards. We see heroic soldiers having the same strength as Loris, Harvester Souls, etc., etc., etc. We're never going to see a heroic soldiers that has 11 strength. We are never going to see vanilla cards that actually are like the premier, and in the future, I only ever foresee vanilla cards having the same strength or the same movement or whatever else as cards with abilities, and that just doesn't seem like it's a logical process for me.
I don't know. I think you're jumping to a conclusion there that's not necessarily true. And what I mean by that is you only have 12 card slots. This isn't Forgotten Souls. This doesn't win you a game. It adds value to the board, card specific, not positional specific, not, situational, just cards, but there are only certain cards in your deck that will get the benefit. That means that this is a situational card at best. And as a situational card at best, maybe you include it, maybe you don't. I don't know that this necessarily moves the needle on whether or not I choose to include heroic soldiers. Flameless lizards, maybe. There's definitely a tipping point where it might get OP. But I don't think this with heroic soldiers is there.
Tinfoil hat time. Is this why Flameless Lizards got the strength reduced a little while back?
I mean, it's possible. It's also possible that in lower leagues it was just getting,
to Thomas's point, I agree that it does put a limit on the design space for vanilla cards. But I would argue that that's fine. Vanilla cards already have a limit based on the other cards in the game already for those mana costs and movement combinations.
There's only so much you can do with them. They're vanilla. What do you can't add you can't add abilities, right? I don't know. I like this idea of trying to create vanilla synergy. I don't I feel like Marked Prey was a really good card to bring up here. I feel like the penalty of playing Marked Prey is not Marked Prey itself, it's that you're playing Copperskin Rangers or whatever card you're trying to play in order to induce the poisoning. And likewise, this has the potential for a Marked Prey style payoff. 10, 12 power, that sounds fantastic. But you gotta be playing some cards that just put you a little behind your opponent. Your opponent's getting more value from their 5 mana card than you're getting. This isn't necessarily creating an advantage for you as it is making up for a deficit. So, unless there's a lot more of these synergy cards that can somehow be abused when, played together with the vanilla cards, I'm not all that worried about this. This is cute. This is neat. I don't think it necessarily incentivizes that much more vanilla card play. What it might do is for people who have limited libraries, who have some level 5 cards, and some of those happen to be the common soldiers that they just, packed a ton of when they bought a bunch of nobles, it might give some of those players an opportunity to punch higher with that deck. Because now, instead of playing Loris, they have to play, Heroic, because that's what they've been doing. That deck now, if they can find a way of squeezing this in, maybe that deck can push another league higher. And I'm okay with that. I think that's good. But at the end of the day, you still have to play Heroic Soldiers, which is kind of like, that's where it falls off for me.
It's a nice just value generating card if you have, like you said, those cards in your deck, and maybe not the most robust library.
Mm-hmm.
Would I rather play Zuri? Probably, but if I didn't have a high level Zuri, I feel like I could make this work. It's I played boosting elixir not too long ago, just kind of messing around with it. It's perfectly fine, and that has positional requirements. This, at least I can just play it for a mana cheaper and buff a couple of cards on the board no matter where they are. That's not terrible.
No, it's not bad. The point I would make about boosting elixir though is like or Zuri, right? Like Zuri is super good, right? But how good are Doppelbox just on their own? Pretty
Doppelbox are very
dang
good on their
good,
own. Yeah,
right? Like that's the
better than
problem.
gifted.
Better than gifted.
Most of the time.
Yeah, right.
Not for defense.
And so in this situation, you're incentivizing me to play a lot of Copperskin Rangers and Crimson Sentries kind of cards. And
yeah, how scared were you the last time you queued up against an opponent and on their opening turn for 3 mana they played Westwind Sailors?
if it was a winter deck, I would have no idea what they're playing. But aside from that, I would be like, "Oh, this is going to be an easy game." Yeah, that's the biggest problem. I want to see more in this direction. If we're going to try to incentivize more play for vanilla cards, to Sabaiku's point, this actually disincentivizes you from playing recruits and Westwind Sailors because they might draw the buff away from the cards you're trying to get value with. So,
Well,
so
if you
instead of
have only 4 or 5 total vanilla cards in your deck, you probably will. You At that point, you'd probably have heroic, flameless, cabin if you're feeling really
Yeah, but
sad.
like Flameless,
oh,
Cabin Girls, Harpies of the Hunt, or Mindless Horde, they're all good targets for this, but they also all don't move. Like they're
and
not
they're
cards that you want to
bad
be playing.
cards. Build me a deck that runs Flameless, Cabin Girls, and Mindless Hordes that is a top tier deck. I don't care what else you want to put in it, but you can only put 11 cards in because I've got the 12th reserved for this. Awakening of the Will isn't tipping that deck over into tier 0 status.
No,
Like,
because you're already playing overstated cards for their mana cost
right.
anyway. Like, what you really need is movement in that deck. So, trying to find something that's vanilla and has movement and also decent strength for the mana cost, it's not that easy.
Well, it doesn't exist. As we were just talking about, the vanilla cards that have movement are at the exact same stat value
Hmm.
wise as cards that have abilities.
Right.
Yeah,
So you're still not even clearing things anyway.
That's the
yeah.
problem, right? Is at best, this is getting you back to parity with your opponent who's playing Zuri with their 5 mana instead of your heroic or flameless.
Yeah, it's almost like your best bet with this maybe is playing something like delegators or
Mount
veterans
up.
that's gonna
Ooh.
like survive a turn, and
Mm-hmm.
then you play another vanilla card that and play your Westwind into veterans on 7 and then Westwind into a 5 strength so that it survives, and then play this and kind of buff them both up.
Or maybe the answer is just always Dark Harvest. If you've got your things that don't have movement, they're the ones that have the most strength anyway, so they're going to survive. So you'll have something on the board for your Dark Harvest ability.
That's true, and a lot of Dark Harvest decks don't play recruits anymore anyway. So that takes out recruits as a potential. Like a remnant of a recruit sitting in a corner with this card in hand feels really bad.
No, it's totally fine. Like you buff your recruits up a little bit, and you buff something else up. Like no matter
Yeah,
what,
but you're
if as
you,
long as you're hitting 2 units, you're coming out ahead on mana cost.
well, sure, but
Well,
if I'm
guys,
playing this,
at
oh, go ahead.
at level 5, it gives strength to 3 random friendly units.
No, Jojo said on Discord earlier today that that was a typo, and it was supposed to be 2 from 3 to
3 to
5.
5. Yeah,
Ew.
yeah. See,
Ew.
that's what I mean. Like, it disincentivizes you from playing the good quote unquote vanilla cards. It's pushing you to play cards that, like, if you play Veterans of War in a competitive game, I like in the Heroes League, because it's hard for me to speak about, like, in gold or platinum anymore. But in the Heroes League, if I'm playing a competitive game that's going back and forth and we're fighting for board, and then on 7 mana I play Veterans, I'm going to say my chances of winning less than 30% at that point.
They drop to 0.
Right? Like, so what are we doing? Like, I have this card that next turn I'm going to get phenomenal value playing this 3-drop with whatever else.
Yeah,
Game's over.
it's kind of like you have to be playing a more defensive focused deck, and then this is your value generator with your cheap, like, I don't know, I gifted in Westwind. I
Can't
keep
do
going back
that.
to that,
That's,
but it's
yeah,
not enough
they're
value.
bad.
Yep. Well,
So,
and the funny thing is, so even if you were to play like the veterans, the only way for it to be basically a non-zero chance of winning is to put it on your opponent's baseline, which if you
it's not
next
there
turn
next turn
want
to
to do the
play.
buff, it's not there. Yeah.
Where'd it go? It went
Well,
away.
if the game goes long enough, you can play your veterans
Oh my
and
goodness.
another unit onto their baseline and then buff them both.
All right, I want you to build me a deck that has 3 vanilla high value cards that can survive into the late game.
I think the problem is if you can play a veterans onto your opponent's baseline, you're probably winning that game anyway. Like we
Right, the
talked
game's
about
over.
with Ulf earlier,
Right.
right?
You
Like
know, this,
There you go. Put
yeah.
off in the same deck, and you'll survive. You'll get enough life off it.
so I like the concept of this card, that we're trying to incentivize play of the cards that aren't seeing play right now. But I'm unconvinced that that's actually a problem that the game needs to solve. And on top of that, like, as a one-off card, this feels a lot like Mark Does Prey. Like, we need a, if this is the direction we want to go, I want to see, like, all the way through a legendary that has synergy with vanilla cards that are on the board or in your hand or whatever. But, like, we need cards that do stuff with vanillas. Maybe one that, like, all your vanilla cards get randomly assigned effects. That sounds nutty. Let's do some stuff, that's all I can think about with this so far, is just that it's a cool card, but I have to play some bad cards to get good value from it. So I'm not sure that that's gonna really work out. That card, by the way, Awakening of the will be available on July 24th, as usual. There will be 2 new Brawl modifiers for those 2 cards, so that you can try them out. They'll be free, which means actually Awakening of the will be pretty solid at 0 mana. We also, by the way, have a new Brawl coming out, guys. It's called Godspeed. This is really cool. Thomas, do you want to talk to me about Godspeed?
So in this mode, ancients will have 2 movement regardless of their initial movement. And actually, I haven't read about this yet, so sorry.
Oh.
Maybe you have to ask Subaiku about it.
No. Tell me about Toad games. I want to hear about Toad games.
Dear God. Oh, flashbacks.
The thing to note about it is even though the ancients have two movements, or two movement, two speed, they only trigger their on moving effects once. So it's not like they move, their on movement effect triggers and then they move again. It's just a single movement of two squares. So that part of it isn't as crazy as you might have first like, oh my gosh, bounded demons are going to be insane. I'm going to make 5 units on the board. No.
Bounded demons will still make units right away, though, which will make them
awesome.
good. They're going to be really, really good in this brawl. Fragmented essences, I'm not really sure what they're going to do. Like, they're going to split, but then only split once, but then each split will still move 2, I guess.
Your guess
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lost Psyches are going to teleport to 1 random tile and then move 2 spaces, so that'll be a little like normal at least.
Wait, is that what they're going to do? They're going to just teleport once? They won't teleport? Oh yeah, because the special effect only happens once. Okay, so, that's weird.
Yeah, all the on-play Big Sisters, which is before moving it'll buff, and usually has 0 movement, so you have to like put it on the board and hope that it survives. Now it'll just play and buff everything that's weaker than it, which is pretty nice.
Bragda-esque.
Yeah, so definitely going to be some fun synergies. The only downside here that I see is that Agile Warriors won't proc twice. It'll only proc once, and that's a shame because that would have been really fun.
That would have been
nuts.
That would have been nuts. Yeah, you've got like absorbing varmints is now a runner, so I have to think about what that means.
I think games are all ending before a lot of these ridiculous things. Just playing Orgon Leechers, you only lose the 3 mana once, and when you're sending it into your opponent's base, you will not lose it again on the beginning of your next turn. You've spent.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Good point.
That's a 11 strength runner right there.
Yup.
You don't mind that?
No. It's a 3 mana 11 strength runner, and you know what you're going to pair it with? Rockworkers. Because it goes in every winter deck. All right, well, that's going to end the main portion of this episode, which means it's time for me to remind you, contact us, please, preferably on our channel on the Stormbound Discord server, on Twitter at BroodSages. You can always email us at thebroodsages@gmail.com. This week, we heard back from a couple of people. Nothing really all that important to mention. We wanted to issue a sincerest apology to MKM. We will put together. I think it's time we bring MKM back, guys. We haven't had MKM on the show in a while, and I think it's MKM time. Is anyone else thinking it's like MKM o'clock?
Definitely, we can make that happen.
Yeah, we got to make that happen soon. So here it is. We're saying it live. We have not contacted him in advance. He's just listening to this, and at this point, he's going, "Oh crap! What? What just happened?" So MKM, if you're out there, if you're listening, and if you think it's pronounced Pokemon, come on to the show. We miss you.
We'll also find out how long it takes for you to listen to our episode.
That's right. That's going to do it for this episode. For Subaiku and Thomas, I am Freeloader. We are the Brood Sages, reminding you to stay hydrated.